up on the ground.
En español.
Science from the Underground by G. Almoji, PhD.
It seems these days that everyone wants you to protect yourself from COVID, whether you want to or not. It's pretty obvious why the high risk group would want to get the vaccine. What about the low risk group, though? The CDC says that everyone 12 years and older should get vaccinated. Kids between 12 and 18 are essentially immune to the virus anyway. I mean, they get infected, but they don't develop disease. So why vaccinate them? The answer is to protect the community. Dr. Bumpus from Johns Hopkins explains. The more people who get vaccinated, the fewer infections will happen, and with fewer infections, there are fewer chances for the virus to mutate. So the normal COVID-19 cannot infect effectively the vaccinated. However, mutations can create escape variants. The normal wild-type COVID-19 can mutate into a form, an escape variant, COVID-19 EV, which is not recognized by the vaccine. This is a major problem because it means that everyone who was at high risk and we rushed to vaccinate them is now again at high risk. Sort of implied by the explanation from Johns Hopkins is that these mutations are completely random, with just more cases and more chances. But evolution is not an entirely random process, right? It's not just throwing the dice over and over. There needs to be some kind of a consequence. So far, I've updated this. So far we have had 176 million cases and 0 escape variants have been reported. The chance of an escape variant emerging and being detected in the community has been lower than 1 in 175 million. This is a tiny chance. However, this completely ignores what we know about evolution. Evolution is not only mutations, which are random, but also natural selection, which is not random. Survival of the fittest in a given environment. If a mutation confers higher fitness, then the benefit from having the mutation is greater than the cost of having the mutation, which leads to survival. If the mutation confers lower fitness, then the cost outweighs the benefit, which leads to extinction. So far, there have been 0 escape variants. Either there were no mutations, so this was never tested, or more likely, cost must have been greater than the benefit. The virus has been spreading and variants have been evolving, but the challenge of dealing with a vaccine was never there. Only now it is becoming a challenge. That's important. And that leads to the paradox that the more people are vaccinated, the risk of escape variants emerging is higher. How could more vaccination lead to higher risk? Just consider the analogy of antibiotics. The use of antibiotics created evolutionary pressure on the bacteria to develop resistance. Similarly, vaccination would create evolutionary pressure on the virus to evolve escape variants. Until now, the world was unvaccinated, mostly unvaccinated. Since we don't see the escape variants so far, we can say that the wild type, this black, has higher fitness than the escape variant, this yellow. The escape variant has one advantage. It can infect people that are vaccinated. Other than that, it is far less efficient than the wild type. What happens in the community? This escape variant emerges. It competes with all these wild types. It is not better than them in any way, and it is eliminated through competition. Survival of the fittest. There is no benefit from being able to escape a vaccine in an unvaccinated community. Straightforward. Once we vaccinate the entire community, according to the CDC, will be considered protected. In a protected community, of course, there is the advantage that escape variants cannot emerge. There are no cases, no chances. That was the bumpus logic. So far, so good, but that only applies to emerging variants, not to imported variants. So, if the US is entirely vaccinated, there is still a chance of an escape variant emerging somewhere else and being imported into the US, a completely protected community. Despite having lower fitness than the wild type, in the absence of the wild type, it is allowed to spread. And it spreads. And it can even improve a bit in this community by adapting. So it's still not as good as the wild type, but it can start really infecting people. Which means that the people that we wanted to protect, this group of big blue people, were safer in an unvaccinated community than they would be in a completely vaccinated community. Let's return to the original problem. We want to maintain the vaccine effective for the high-risk group. How do we do that? So far, the world has been unvaccinated and no escape variants have emerged. Really tiny probability, meaning that there is negative selection against escape variants in the presence of the wild-type virus, the normal virus. However, these wild-type viruses are still dangerous. They can infect those at high risk. So what do? We vaccinate those at high risk, creating a shield around. The vaccine is the shield that prevents people at high risk from being infected with COVID. And the wild-type COVID, which is highly effective in this unvaccinated community, keeps out the escape variants which would break this shield.